Hey everybody, thank you so much for your patience in waiting for us to return to the main feed. We are officially back. We've got tons of new episodes coming up for you in the new format. But if you've been jonesing to hear us talk about any cartoon related stuff over on our Patreon, Cartoons That Curse After Dark, we've been talking about tons of movies. We've talked about tons of franchises, popular ones people like. Tariq, which ones have we been talking about?
Shrek, Toy Story, Paddington, Ted, Kung Fu Panda, the list goes on and on.
Gumby 1 even. And
yeah.
Look, some of our best stuff is on the Patreon. It's our worst kept secret or best kept secret. It's a well kept secret. You guys should go check out our stuff over there. It's really great. Patreon.com/cartoons that curse. If you want a little bit of extra stuff, we've got like 35 episodes over there. Go check it out and cue the theme song.
Word.
I've been watching them for years, it's always been something that fit with all the animated characters that's doing their own bits. With a fry who's in the future and a family guy that sucks. With a father from a Helluva family runs amok. The show inspires is the same guy except he totally say and diverse.
Let's watch cartoons that curse.
Yeah, that's bananas.
As rough.
What the is up, everybody? Welcome to Cartoons That Curse. My name is Johnny. I'm here with my co-host Tariq, and we have an amazing guest today, creator of Hazbin Hotel and Helluva boss, Vivienne Medrano, aka Vivziepop. How you doing, Vivienne? Thanks for joining.
Yeah,
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We're really excited. Since we talk about adult animation and it's it's called Cartoons That Curse, you kind of have the quintessential cartoons that curse out there right now.
Yes.
It's kind of a perfect fit.
A lot of cursing. Cursing in my show.
a lot of cursing on the podcast, so it's fun.
That's true.
Good,
sometimes we get demonetized. Sometimes we have to reel it in a little bit. Thanks so much for joining us. So obviously we talk about adult animation a lot on here, but we also just kind of go on tangents talking about stuff that we watch. So our first question for our guests is just, what are you watching right now? I know you're really busy and you're running 2 shows, but what are you watching if you have any time?
Oh man, well, the honest answer is I've stumbled onto like, it's not even true crime, but it's like horrible like mountaineering accidents and stuff compilation videos. That's the honest answer. But in terms of like actual like shows and things, the latest thing that I binged through, which I'd already seen but I watched it again, was The Boys and Gen V, nice. Which I really like. I like, even though I love adult animation, right now we haven't had like a new show lately, so I've been kind of more in the live action world, which I also really love. And sure. So that show was kind of like in the adult animation world of like how raunchy and how visceral and violent it is. It's kind of similar to Invincible. So right, I really like that one. So that was the most recent thing that I was watching.
That's one that literally every single person in my life is begging me to watch, and I haven't.
Yeah,
watched yet.
Same.
Oh, I highly recommend it. It's like not even just because it's also on Prime, which is also very fun. I'm very honored by that. But I'm a big fan of Seth Rogen's projects, and it's definitely something you can feel his touch on. It's really raunchy. It's got a ton of cursing, but it's also like very like visceral, and like it gets super gory. But it's got amazing characters, like phenomenal characters, and some really, really like interesting themes. And obviously like the take on superhero stuff is so like, it's done really well. Like obviously it's like what if superheroes were like an evil, like, corporate run entity, right. But there's also like a lot of heart with like, there are some that do genuinely want to be superheroes. And it's like this weird, like, cynical view of like, what if kind of the wrong people got superpowers, but there's a lot of depth to all those characters, like even the really, really bad ones. So it's just cool. It's just a cool show. So I highly recommend it. It's super
I gotta
fun.
check out. It almost sounds like it's got a little bit of a like Venture Bros flair, but like a little more realistic.
Yes.
Where it's
it's like a grittier, much more R-rated, like a ton more fucks are thrown around. But I think that's why I like it too, because it's definitely got that kind of cruder Seth Rogen humor in it, which is fun too. Like it just gets really like, what the hell did we just fucking watch kind of thing.
Totally.
Which is fun to me. Like I think it's great.
Yeah, I love the way he's kind of pivoted into producing and writing a lot of projects.
Producing bangers, like just so good. Like I was already a fan of like, because I like his humor, I like his movies, but seeing like all the stuff since like that, all these things that he's touched, like Invincible and The Boys, and obviously it's a lot of other people too, but it's just cool that he's associated. The recent Mutant Mayhem movie.
I was about to say,
the
Turtles.
Really, really good.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like awesome. So he's got a good track record. So I respect the hell out of the guy. He's awesome.
Yeah, I think Mutant Mayhem was like Tariq's favorite movie last year.
That was my roommate's, but I love that thing.
It's up there. I thought it was
really good.
like I was like, nothing could really top Spider-Verse for a while, and then that one came out. It was just so fun, and it had such a similar vibe of just like, this is better than it should have been. It's like so good.
For real. Yeah. I just kept thinking if I were a kid when that movie came out, it would have been my favorite thing in the world.
That's what I said.
It would have been,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm more into like sitcoms and comedy, but like all the cool cartoon movies that the kids are getting now, I would have been a different beast by the time I was an adult.
So you brought up adult animation, and obviously we talk about that a lot here, and we're going to talk about BoJack today, which we're stoked to do because BoJack is like my favorite show, one of Tariq's favorite show, and it's one that we've never talked about on the pod. So like this is we got like plenty that we want to dive into. But
wait, is this how I'm finding out? This is how I'm finding out that you think it's one of my favorite shows and not my favorite show?
Is it your number one? I didn't want to speak fully for you.
It's a lot. It's so cool seeing how many people it's like the favorite show, because it's mine as well. It's my favorite series of all time. And
it's so good.
Like it's just incredible, but it's also not one that has like a big fandom or a big, like it just kind of exists as this awesome gem of a like masterpiece kind of animated series.
Yeah,
awesome.
Totally. It's got like a very dedicated fan base, but they're not like massive. Like it's definitely my favorite. Do you have any other adult animated series that are your favorites? Are there ones that you grew up on that sort of like helped influence your taste?
Absolutely. Yeah. The big one I cite is South Park. I still love South Park. It's become like a weird comfort show because like, even though I've kind of fallen off following it as dedicated. I've seen everything. I think the only thing I haven't seen, there's been some new specials that I haven't quite caught because they're kind of all over the streaming sites, and I'm just like I can't quite keep up. But like that show like is like the one that like was so like I could just pick up any of those like kind of classic like seasons where I was like developing. And just watch them and just know them by heart. And for me, that was the show that turned me into a fan of adult animation because I was weirdly sheltered from it. I was very like avoidant of things on the internet. It's really funny because like the internet, when I was, I grew up with it like becoming a thing, right? So like when I was in like middle school, high school, I would see, or maybe more so middle school, I would see like raunchy art by accident of like characters I loved from like Pokemon or like the shows I'd watch, and I was like, no, that's horrible, like I can't look at that. And so I like avoided anything like too raunchy. Like it was also like the time of like Albino Black Sheep was the website, or like E-Bombs World, like those kind of websites, like do you remember those? Like so I like remember also like seeing things like that. Oh, there she goes. Seeing things like that and being like very like worried it was too raunchy or like everything like that. And so South Park, I remember watching it with a friend at like a friend's sleepover because she just, she had an older sister. So we would watch like the more adult things like, with her there. And I saw the episode I think it's called Canceled, where they go to like the aliens and like we find out that Earth is a TV show. And I don't know why, but I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen in like my life. And so I used to, my parents were very like, or at least my mom was very like, didn't want us to watch certain things. And so I had a video iPod and I would like put download from iTunes as many episodes of South Park as I could afford on like a $15 gift card, and then like transfer them, take them up to my like computer up in my room and put them on my video iPod, and then like watch them like a drug addict. So
that's so funny.
Yeah, South Park's very special to me in that way. Like, it was like my gateway drug to adult animation. And since then, I mean, I really like American Dad. I think American Dad is really underrated. Like, it's actually really funny and has really good characters. And it's kind of more in the sitcom. So that one kind of scratches like that sitcom itch for me in the adult animation space, the primetime space. I think that's my favorite of the primetime ones. Recently, I kind of became like a born again Simpsons fan because I hadn't really watched that show, but I love it and I love the characters. So I was very late to the game on that one. And then Futurama, I think, is a classic. You know, I love that one.
You're speaking our language. These are all our faves.
Yeah, you're checking them all off.
Yeah. So it's because they're good. Yeah, it's because they're really amazing shows. And like, I feel like I'm missing some because I feel like there are some really like kind of not as talked about animated, like adult animated shows, but those are the ones that I think had the biggest influence. So I just have to cite them. But then, you know, BoJack was the one that changed kind of the game in terms of what adult animation could be. So, or at least to me. So that one ended up being extra special in that way.
Yeah. That's so funny that because I also used to watch South Park episodes on my video iPod, and I would not only that, I would like I would like download sound clips off like LimeWire and like just like the songs and clips from the show, and I would just put them in their own like South Park audio track and listen to them. I would listen to the anime song from Good Times with Weapons all the time.
Yeah,
let's fight in love.
That's so funny.
That's so great.
Okay. So so now I don't know if you've done many interviews since Hazbin has come out, but how do you feel now that season 1 is like out there in the world? Like, I know you're working on it for years. Is it weird that it's like available and people are talking about it, or like, how do you feel?
It feels great because yes, it was like 2 years of production, and then, you know, the series was originally going to come out in the summer of last year, and then for very valid reason, because it was because Amazon kind of entered the game and kind of swooped the show up and stuff, and greenlit the second season and everything, like kind of, and they needed, which is like my favorite part about the series, like this was something I didn't have any involvement with, but I love it, is that it got dubbed and like, you know, like translated into like a ton of languages. So that was actually why it didn't come out in the summer anymore, was because you know, once it got, you know, picked up, it could be properly localized, which I thought was amazing. I think it makes the show so much more accessible, and obviously like so much more like, you know, it's become a hit in many other countries. So it's really like, I think that was absolutely necessary, but that's one of the reasons why it was kind of like we had it done, but it then had to go through this whole other process and then got a proper release. And so it was a lot of like kind of almost like, you know, we'd had it done. So it was kind of like, yay, that season exists, but nobody's seen it yet. But we've seen it like a million times. So we don't, you know, like I kind of already knew all the jokes, all the songs, everything like so intimately. And so it was really like kind of almost a lot of anxiety from like, oh my gosh, like people have been waiting so long for this show. I really hope it lives up to, you know, what people want it to be. And, you know, and there was a lot of anxiety because it also, you know, at 8 episodes at 22-minute runtime, it's a very brisk, very tight story. So to me, it runs more like a movie, almost like a really long movie, or like a musical, you know, it's like a 3 hour, like almost like 3.5, maybe 3 hour long runtime of like the whole season. So, you know, I was very like, oh God, you know, like there was a lot of like apprehension, I guess, or like anxiety of just like, I hope people like this, because we put like absolutely everything into it, and I was very, very proud of it. And I felt like it delivered on a lot of things based on the pilot originally and all these other things. So, but you have no idea, right? And it's just sitting there, right? It's just been sitting there done, and we're kind of already starting to like move into the next season, and, you know, everything was kind of moving forward. So when it came out, it was like this really surreal burst of like an explosion, which happened similarly with the pilot, but with that, it was very like natural. It was just like, hey, we're putting this out, and then it just happened. Where this was like there was an expectation and a like a I hope, it's good enough. Right. And then when it exploded again, I was like, yay, it worked. Yay, we did it. So it feels great. It feels amazing. I'm so honored that people are enjoying it. I'm so honored that people like these characters and the songs, especially. I mean, I knew as soon as I was hearing the demos come through that the soundtrack would be very popular. Yeah. So
seems like I can't take credit for that. Internet. Yeah. It's going nuts.
I'm very proud. I'm very honored by my songwriting team of Sam and Andrew. They're insanely talented. They did those songs in such record time that it's incredible that they're as banger as they are, honestly. So it's awesome.
You mentioned that it was that when Amazon picked it up that you started doing all the. So was the show originally not going to be on Amazon Prime, and then they came in and localized it and put it on their platform?
Yeah, well, originally it was A24 that greenlit the show, and I'm very, very honored by them because there was a lot of interest in the show, like a lot of interest in the show from like all the big major networks, but the issue was more so, I think that Hazbin is initially, especially based off the pilot, is kind of hard to put in a box. It's so different from what exists out there, and I think there was a lot of the conversations were more about developing the show to fit in a certain like way or something like that. And what I love about A24 is they kind of went, let's try to just do it and see what happens there. So the original plan was, like they were going to maybe find a way to distribute it themselves, or there's going to be some kind of more indie route for it. But they were the ones that kind of took the plunge with me and greenlit the first season. And then later down the line, when more of the show was done and you could see what was happening, Amazon came in, and they came in just as strong as A24 did, with a lot of faith and a lot of love for the show, and so then it ended up with them. So it was just a little untraditional in the way it started, but like ended up in like in my opinion, a very good home. So it worked out. But I'm very thankful to A24 for doing that plunge instead of it going into like a potential development and maybe changing from what I wanted it to be, because that I think was the biggest concern.
Amazing. And then you're running 2 shows. That's gotta be so. It's gotta be so much.
No, it's great. I mean, I'm a workaholic by nature, so I really like working, constantly, and I love both these stories. I love both these. Like it's a shared universe, which also like keeps me like inventing and making sure things work technically between the two things. But the stories and the stakes between the two series are so different that it feels like one's a vacation from the other. When I want something really, really big and dramatic, where I'm like, oh gosh, the characters like die, characters like go through these big, like massive themes and changes. Whereas in Helluva, it's much more intimate. It's much more realistic. It's kind of like a soap opera in a way, and a workplace comedy. And it has to do with class systems and flawed, like dysfunctional relationships and people. It's much more centered around that, which I think is really fun. So yeah, they're kind of two sides of a very, two very different sides of a coin, I guess.
Yeah. I was really curious because I remember hearing like Seth MacFarlane, for example, we talked about American Dad and how he pitched, the only reason he pitched American Dad was because they canceled Family Guy. And then they brought Family Guy back literally around the same time. And then he had to like run back and forth between both offices. And I was wondering, like, was it always the plan to do 2 at the same time, or did you just kind of like fall into doing that?
I kind of fell into it because what happened was I'm kind of a creative shark. I just have to be working on something, or else like, I'll just literally die. And so for me, it was that when Hazbin entered this stage of finding, like we going to producers, working, finding its home with A24, and then, figuring out where it would go from there, and, pitching it and doing all kind of the traditional industry things. We couldn't work on more. So I was kind of like, thankfully Helluva kind of came at the perfect time. I'm very indebted to Brandon who helped me like start that project and voices the main character, because it was his faith in it that like, he was just like a lot of generals that I had for development of other projects. Like development takes a long time, and those conversations take a long time. And so I kind of had expected it to be like a lot of the other generals I'd go on, where it doesn't actually manifest. Whereas when I met with Brandon, like, hey, I have this project that's like kind of similar to the one I'm currently making. The Hazbin pilot hadn't come out yet when I met with him. But I was like, I think you'd be kind of perfect for this world and for this character. And he was like, oh yeah, like I'm free on like Sundays and like pretty much every day except for like Wednesday, but like Sundays are my best day. And I was like, wait, like we can, like, you want to, he was like, yeah, we can start, right? Like, yeah, let's just do it. Wow. And I was like, okay. And so, yeah. And so we ended up writing the pilot really during, the later half of making the Hazbin pilot. And it just so happened that there was a ton of artists that had just left a studio in Mexico, and they all came to me kind of en masse, and they were like, hey, like, we really need work. We'd love to work on your pilot. That was the Hazbin pilot at the time. And I was kind of like, well, we already have enough people on that pilot, like, but I have this other thing. And so almost all those people came over and worked on the Helluva pilot at the same time as the Hazbin pilot. And that's why Helluva's pilot came out not that long after the Hazbin pilot, because it just kind of, everything was very faded. It's felt like a very faded show. And if it wasn't for Helluva, Hazbin wouldn't be nearly as strong, because I found so many artists through working on that first season of Helluva that then jumped onto Hazbin and already knew the style, already knew the vibe. I was comfortable working with them. So it, like, the shows have helped each other in so many ways. Like, they really are so sibling. And Helluva also, like, just helped me, I think, develop my writing skills in general, because I learned so much writing that first season and writing the second season. And Hazbin came after we'd finished writing the second season of Helluva. So I had 2 full seasons of like writing under my belt before writing on Hazbin. So I just feel like it was just kind of perfect that they were, and thankfully one was more heavily in production while the other was like first season of Helluva was already kind of done by the time Hazbin really wrapped up. And so season 2 was kind of the balance season. And we're still learning how to balance, because a lot of the crews consist of similar or the same people. So we have to like really discipline, like who's working on which project at what time and, things like that. And for me, my roles kind of become more of a oversight role entirely, because I can't be as hands-on on either project without it causing delays in some way. So yeah, it's been a challenge to have 2 full projects like running, but at least one of them is being handled by another company. So there is an element of like, it's not both things at Spindle Horse, thankfully. Like Spindle Horse is heavily involved with both shows, but it's a little bit more manageable.
Totally.
So.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it also just feels like sort of the different release models, like you having Helluva come out, every month or 2 for this time in between even the Hazbin pilot and the Hazbin release. It feels like that's built hype for the world, and for even just for Hazbin coming out. It feels like Hazbin had more hype leading into the first season than like you could have even hoped for after the pilot. Yeah. I mean, especially after all the time, it seems like it was all very, very fortuitous in how it all came together.
Right.
So one other question, we were talking about shows, like we love The Simpsons. Tariq is like the biggest Family Guy fan in the world. We're big fans of those like kind of sitcom shows. And we were talking about how interesting the difference in stuff like that is, where The Simpsons is a show that's created by someone and then is largely passed off to other creatives who there's different showrunners every couple of years, except for those 20 years that Al Jean showed. But largely in the early days, they were changing showrunners. Family Guy has different showrunners, and that's very different than stuff like Hazbin or Helluva or BoJack, which are very creator driven. Is that a world? Is that the world you're interested in? Is the world of something like The Simpsons or Family Guy where you create an idea and pass it off to other people of interest to you, or are you someone who like really needs the hands-on authorship of something?
I feel like as of this second, very hands-on, like all the stories, because I think that's the thing about me, is that I've tried to challenge myself to come up with something like The Simpsons or like Family Guy that's episodic and that has some development, but it has to return to the status quo at the end of the day. And funny enough, Hell of a Bus was sort of that in the beginning, but I've found that I just can't do it easily. I'm kind of just a storyteller by nature. I like seeing development of characters I like and I, enjoy. So I kind of fell into, I think, at least right now, the worlds and stories that I'm making right now are very much stories. So they're very, hands-on. I have a vision. I know exactly where both shows end. Cool. I know where they could continue, and there could be spinoffs and there could be more expansion of the story, but I know where like the main, like for example, Blitz and Helluva and Charlie and Hazbin, like I know where their stories end, and I know where a lot of the other character stories end. And because of that, I want to see them through, and I think that's just kind of how I am as a creator and how I found, because even when I challenge myself to try to make something that's a little bit more episodic, I just find myself not being as interested in that. What's nice about Helluva, though, is that we are like, I don't want to reveal kind of something we have in the works, but we do have a way of exploring the episodicness of Helluva in kind of a different way, which I'm very excited for. It's going to be somewhat outside of the main series, but just because that was one that was created initially to be a little bit more episodic, we thought it would be fun to explore that side of it, kind of their job and the missions and stuff they go on. But for Hazbin, that one was always a straight story. And so someday I'd love to like explore what like just a fun cast of characters and them just doing things would be. But I think naturally that's like harder for, like that would be like a challenge for me. So someday it might happen, but I do enjoy it. Like it's a very comfort kind of thing. Like South Park's like that. American Dad's like that, and Simpsons is like that. But even within those shows, the things I enjoy the most are like the little tiny nuggets of like change that happen, to the characters.
And South Park especially has been embracing that in the more, in the last 6 or 7 years or so. And it's been so interesting to see them sort of change. And that's an interesting one, because it is this sort of episodic sitcom-y show, but it has been those two guys the whole time, and that's like unheard of. It's like unheard of for that kind of show.
It's more like what they've been doing it for so long that they're probably just like, how do we keep it interesting for ourselves? Because that's the other thing, the other risk I think creators reach is when a franchise kind of outlives them and they want to do different things, which like to me, like obviously I want to see the Hazbin story through, but like, if there's a world where there's more after that, that might be the time where I'm like, what, maybe a new voice could be interesting in this unit, you know what I mean? But that's obviously like far off. Who knows if that will even happen? But like that's where I could see like passing a baton, is if a new story is kind of birthed in a universe. And if there's enough information about the universe and how it works that, I wouldn't have to be the one like kind of overseeing everything. But that's what's cool about having like a universe that's really big, is I feel like you can bring other people into it and kind of have other voices inside of it, which is fun.
Totally amazing. Before we talk about BoJack, I do want to talk about the Broadway inspirations, just with the musical aspect of Hazbin. So like watching through the first season, I was talking to some friends and they were, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but it almost feels like the whole season is like structured like a Broadway musical, like same number, same, like right around the same number of songs as a musical will have, like about the same length that a musical is. Was that intentional, or was that something that just kind of happened as you made it? Or was that the inspiration?
That was kind of natural because, like I said earlier, like we kind of had this set season of 8 episodes at 22 minutes, and that's, like it amounts to about the size of a musical minus the intermission. Right. So it like, or I guess like with no intermission, but stuff in the intermission time frame. But what's cool about it is that it kind of worked out that way, because I do feel like there's a 2-act kind of vibe of it where we get to like the first half of the season had to set up so much like that was going to be paid off in the second half. Like that was kind of the challenge was, because I remember seeing early on, especially with people talking about like some of these reveals and stuff. It's like, oh, why was this revealed in the first episode versus, and I was like, well, because we have to pay it off.
Yeah.
In the fifth episode or you know what I mean? Like it was very structured. Like we did look at the whole season of scripts and look really, really sharply on it and make sure like everything, except for the mysteries, we did want to continue because we did want some lingering questions and things like that. But we wanted to make sure all the things set up particularly for this season to like have enough space between them that would feel somewhat comfortable, like it wasn't like back to back to back kind of thing. But that was a challenge, and it was really, I think we kind of did have to lay it out as almost like a 2-act kind of thing, almost like a musical. And then when it came to the songs, like I remember early on there wasn't an expectancy for the songs to be as hefty as they were, and that was kind of a challenge for me because I was like, I want these songs to be like real songs. Like I want them to not, because in the pilot we had songs that were really like I think the Inside of Every Demon is a Rainbow is like only like a minute or so, and then the reprise is only like 30 seconds or so. So it's like very, very short. And there was an expectancy of that, like, oh yeah, the songs are gonna be like a minute or something, right? And I was like, no, we're gonna have real songs. Like that's I think we should have real songs, and I think that paid off because it was there was a lot of work between me and the songwriters to make sure that what will the songs cover, how much of the script will they cover, how it was a very, very like interesting game of like making sure that like this is what the script is going to say, this is what the songs are going to say. The songs are 3 minutes, so that means that the script has to be like X amount, you know what I mean? Like it was a challenge, but it was really fun to like work really closely with the song team and like really make sure all those songs like hit a very specific purpose in the episode. So I think in that way it was very Broadway, because I think that's I've never been a part of a Broadway show, but I assume it's similar where like you kind of have the story or the movie or like whatever kind of the basis of it is, and then you have to like pinpoint which moments are the songs, which scenes are going to be like told in song form.
Right.
The cat totally just caused things to pop up on my window. But it was super fun, and obviously the voice cast being so much from the Broadway world just I think lended to how much more Broadway it felt in the overall final.
Are you a big Broadway fan? Do you see a lot of Broadway shows?
Yes, I do. I'm a big Broadway fan. I've been a big Broadway fan since middle school, since like I started listening to these soundtracks. I was someone like, I think my gateway drug. I love Annie. That was the one I was in elementary school. So I think that was like my initial like love for theater came from like being in a show, because it was like a mandatory thing in our school, like to be in the musical. And of course it was Annie, because it's always Annie. And then in high school and on, I fell in love with like the soundtracks of like Chicago and Wicked and Little Shop of Horrors and everything like that. And then once I could actually afford going to see shows, I see as many as possible. So now I have like 2 massive binders full of playbills that I've seen of shows. And I try to see things because they close really fast nowadays. A show like keeping a show alive on Broadway is a feat in itself. So I try to see as many as possible, because you'd be amazed how many gems are just completely lost to time. Even really popular ones like the Beetlejuice musical was a huge hit.
Yeah, and it's gone.
and it thankfully got like a revival, but it still ended up closing. And I'm like, it's such a good show, and not everyone could see. I also wish there was more pro shots. I know why there aren't, but
same.
It would be nice to make Broadway more accessible.
Yeah,
because it's always nice to share.
And it's in one place, and it can be kind of expensive for some people. I do wish they would at least if a show's kind of going off, why do a pro shot?
Exactly.
I'm in the process of plotting a move to New York, and I know I'm going to become such a Broadway bitch. Like I'm just going to be watching.
Yes.
So I've visited a couple times over the last couple of years, and I've seen like I think I've gone to 6 shows just in those like 2 trips. But the thing that's like breaking my brain and my sort of hyper fixated brain is the idea that like I could see a show I love with equally great different casts all the time.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Hadestown like 6 times because I'm like, I want to see these new people and I want to see these people. And I'm like, which is a little dangerous for my wallet, but yeah.
But it's such a rewarding experience. Like, cause like so what's nice, the magic of live theater is that every single time you see it, you're seeing something different. Like you are seeing a different decision from the actor, even if it's the same actor before. Like I had the pleasure of seeing Beetlejuice a couple times and like Alex would almost always do something different and Leslie would almost always do something different. And it was so fun, especially seeing like, the show like normal when I first saw it to seeing, I got to see the closing and like the amount of like extra and like love and fun that the actors put into that final performance was like so amazing to see. And I've gotten to see a couple closing shows and I love the energy. Like obviously it's a bittersweet energy because they're like performing these songs for the final time and there's always like a lot like I've seen the actors like kind of break and cry when they wouldn't normally and things like that, and it's just so amazing to like kind of be like I'm witnessing the final time that this incredible show is getting put on and these actors are feeling that in real time. And like, it's just so cool, because that versus like an opening night is like completely different performances and completely different energy. And then, or just like a normal, like a matinee versus a nighttime, like there's so much variety and knowing people on Broadway now and getting to know them and talking. Cause I've asked them questions about, I'm like, what's it like? I know, my friend Don Daryl Rivera, who he's Wally Wackford in Helluva Boss. And he's, a couple voices in Hazbin. He voices like the porn director Travis and stuff like that. Nice. Love working with him. He's been Iago in Aladdin on Broadway for like since it started, like since it opened. Wow. So a very, very long time. And I asked him, I was like, how, like, is it like, how, like, is it just, like, do you just have it? He's like, oh yeah, like I have it. It's like on autopilot. I know the show so well. I can like, I know it so well that I'm just like, just doing it. But what's fun is that he always like he's a show stealer every time. He's so animated and he like does a lot of pratfalls and things like in the show. And I'm like, it's so cool that he's like he knows the show so intimately, like muscle memory, but also he brings something fun and new to it every time. And I think that's so cool. Like that's what's cool about live theater is it's real people doing it. So
yeah.
Do you have an interest in adapting Hazbin for the stage?
Oh, I'd love to. It's funny. I didn't initially. I'd love to be involved with a musical of any kind. So whether it be Hazbin or something new or original or someone else's or something like that, I just want to be in that world at some point. But it's never been said more by people who have more ability to do it than me, Right. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think if the show continues to be successful.
So. I just imagine like even just like the costumes and the characters and the world, how cool those sets could be on a stage. Like
it'd be so cool.
Yeah.
It'd be a very gaudy. I've seen like shows like Moulin Rouge and things that have these like really extravagant sets with lots of red on them. And I'm like, that it could totally be done.
Yeah.
And,
I was gonna say, I'm imagining just the lights, the big Hazbin Hotel lights on top of the hotel
like
on the stage would be so cool. Yeah.
It'd be the coolest thing ever. Like I would literally cry so hard if I ever saw that. I cried really hard when I saw the billboard in Times Square, and that was its own adventure. It was extra funny too because it's fun fact because I know a lot of people are commenting. They're like, it's like you're seeing it for the first time every single time, and I'm like, that's because it was in rotation every like 15 to 20 minutes and it only lasted about 15 seconds, so it was like seeing it the first time. We were like, go there it is, it's there, because it was also really, really cold, so we were like dying, and then we're like, okay, it's there, like, all right, like video picture, like it was the coolest thing ever. But it was like it was definitely an adventure with how cold it was.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for talking to us about all this stuff. We've just been like, I mean, Tariq and I have been watching the show. We're watching it week to week, and we're kind of geeking out about a lot of it. It's like we're just happy to to be able to ask you so many questions about it. Yeah,
thank you. No, I appreciate it. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. It's been the greatest honor ever seeing people enjoy it and people theorizing and people like because that's what I love about making stories and telling, and the especially the characters aspect. Like I love these characters, and it was one of those things that I'm very honored that people love them as much as they do, because I know that the story had to kind of go, we had to tell the story. So there wasn't as many moments with these characters, I think, just being together that I would have wanted. But I really love that we were able to characterize them in a way that still makes their personalities and their relationships with each other clear. So that I'm very happy that people still enjoy the characters, like interacting and having fun together. It just, I don't know, means a lot to me.
I had so much fun theorizing and talking about it, but it was funny because, not being as in tune with everything since the pilot came out, and the fandom is just so like, they're so ravenous for every piece of information. And it was so cool to see, but also just like, I watch the show and I'm like, here's an idea. And I write it down. And then I have comments that are like, actually in this Q&A 3 years ago, they said this.
Well, that's the other thing too I feel bad about, is I feel like the problem with being a creator who's existed and developed these characters on the internet my whole, because I've been on the internet, went from DeviantArt to Tumblr to Twitter to YouTube, so there is a lot of information and not all of it's accurate. And then people go, because a lot of it's changed. And so my attitude is always like, whatever I say, whatever the show says, whatever Helluva says, whatever Hazbin says, and then whatever maybe we say in like a very I don't even know. I don't even trust what I say in Q&As to this day. I try to like preface it with like, I can't confirm. Like I think recently I was asked on a live stream, the one we did with the cast just recently, it was like, what's everybody's birthdays? And I'm like, I can't fucking confirm that, dude. Because I'm gonna change it. It's gonna somehow cause a problem, because I used to try, like I used to be like, well, I guess it's this or whatever, and then people go, okay, add that to the wiki, and like the wiki is the most inaccurate thing in the world. I'll say that. So
we got everything on it.
Yeah, because it has everything, and then it also has like things that literally are made up. I've seen it. I've seen like literally this character doesn't exist, or like, oh, one time Viv, or like Viv's friend said this on a podcast once, and I'm like, what? Okay, like Viv's sister said this, and I'm like, okay, that's not.
We're gonna get a whole new wiki entry just from this podcast episode.
Exactly. Yeah. There's gonna the entry that's like, Viv says the wiki isn't accurate at all, and don't.
There's gonna be a wiki entry about the wiki's inaccuracy.
To be fair to whoever's running the wiki, I'm sure it's hard to keep up with all this information and outdated information, all this stuff, but I feel like it should just be what's in the show. Like, just stick to that. Stick to what's in the show, and you've got the best chance at something accurate, right?
Totally. Totally.
This was just a ploy for it was just a ploy for Johnny to find out that he was right all along.
I told you guys. Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, let's get talking about BoJack. Sorry, we talked for like 40 minutes about Hazbin, but we're here to geek out about BoJack, because we know you, as you mentioned, it's your favorite show. So I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but the first thing I want to ask you is, why is BoJack your favorite adult animated show?
I love that question. For me, it's like when BoJack came out, I was developing Hazbin, and I was like wanting to make it. And there was an element, because Hazbin originally, the concept was much more episodically broad. Like, it was very like, here's some weird, wacky characters. I wanted to put them in one place, and have them, they're all from different periods of history. And so it had more of like a weird, like sitcom-y, like American Dad, or even like Drawn Together kind of influence, where it was just raunch and weird characters stuck together who don't really like each other and like a lot, and have to like deal with that. That was like the initial concept, when I was just kind of taking characters from all over my roster of characters, because I have made many characters in my day, and so they've kind of come from all over. Like Alistair I had a really long time ago, Angel came more in high school, Charlie came more in college, so it was kind of all over. And when BoJack came out, it was during this time where I didn't really know what I wanted the show to be. And I was kind of trying to put it in a box. And when BoJack came out, it was this storyline, because it starts a little in that
in a box
adult animation world.
Yeah.
But then pretty fast, it gets out of that box and starts being its own thing. And I was like, wait, you can do, like, you can have an adult animated show that, like, kind of has this really intense, because it's not just that it starts telling a story, because I feel like it's not the first one to do that, but it is the first to do a story, to me, that challenges what it's like to, like this main character is so deeply flawed, and like challenges like a traditional storyline of like how you're supposed to feel at the end. Like, it's not happy, and it's not, it doesn't have easy answers, and it has these big, broad questions. And to me, that was kind of like a huge like wake up of like, wait, I don't have to shove my story into a box for it to be an animated show, and that kind of, between that and other like musical, because there's also been a lot of musical theater recently, like musical shows that, like on Broadway, that are more in the adult space and tell really challenging, really like sometimes upsetting, sometimes really dark and like kind of mess up stories. Like, for example, Dear Evan Hansen also was kind of new around the time, and that's a really complicated story and a very like kind of fucked up main character, and things like Book of Mormon, that was like a comedy, but it was like it was like South Park humor and everything. So like all these things kind of that were innovating what adult media can be came around like the perfect time for me to be like, you know what, I can tell a story and it can be a musical and I can do this. So I cite BoJack as like really the show that came at like the perfect time for me to do what I actually wanted to do instead of what I thought I had to do with Hazbin. And just in general, as BoJack came out, it became this like incredible, like it's such a good story, because the first season is good, but the second season, especially like the way it ends, is like, holy shit. Like, you just jaw drop, like, oh my God, this is the main character. We're watching, and I one of my co-writers, I like made him watch the show, and that was the point where he was like, what the fuck, like, oh my. And that's what sold him on the show, was that was Escape from LA, that episode. So and it's good. Like it's so good, that's a brilliant episode of television. And I'm like, I think once that happened, I was like, okay, BoJack is different. Like, this is a show that and also just like semi being like, I wasn't as in the industry as I am now, but knowing kind of like how hard that must have been to like pitch and like pull off is like amazing. Like, I'm insanely in awe of what they were able to tell and accomplish in that show. And obviously it just continued on. I also think it's very underrated in its humor. I think it's very funny. Like, the show is
funny.
It's so funny. Like, I cite how horrible and like biting in that first season some of BoJack's like insults are, like where he tells like, he's like, that was, and I don't kid you lightly, worse than like 100 9/11s or something. I was like, I love that as an insult. Like, I'm just like, this is the meanest thing. Like, I love like stuff like that. Like, I was like, this show's so like weirdly like edgy and dark, but like in a way that doesn't feel as edgy and dark as I think things like South Park and Family Guy are. And
it
so
definitely feels like the stories kind of over, like, it in terms of the fandom and reaction to the show, it does overshadow how funny it is. Like, the show really is just jokes on jokes on jokes. Even the background gags, they're just constantly putting stuff in there, and it feels like people talk about like, oh, sad, depressed horse show, it's the saddest show ever. Like, it's also so funny.
Exactly. No, I've had the same like vibe of it, because obviously the dark elements of it are its standout thing. So I understand why that is what people like associate the show with, because unfortunately that always happens. Like, with my show, it's the cursing and things like that. Like, there's always like something that stands out as like kind of a thing that you're not used to, or like not used to in this way. And so that's like what becomes like, I guess, the stereotype of the show. And so for BoJack, it's the sad like therapist, like wordy depression show. And I'm like,
Right.
it's really not that. And even the characters that get into these like really deeper conversation. Like I know there was one moment going around on Twitter where it was the episode Good Damage, where Diane is talking about how like there's like that moment she has with Princess Carolyn where she's talking about like, if I hadn't gone through that, like what good is what I went through if I can't do something with it. And it's one of those things where that's like one of the most beautiful moments in the entire show. Like that, I'm not even like the biggest Diane like she's not the character I relate to, but that particular episode I related to so intensely. And I think a lot of creators and writers probably do in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I felt like it was so articulated, like in a way that was natural for the character but it in isolation, everyone was like, wow, this therapy session from BoJack. And I was like, this is one of the last episodes. This is one of the culminating moments of one of the main characters.
Right.
You guys don't know shit. Fuck you. I think I even said something on Twitter. I was like, come on. Like, come on. So like, it's one of those things where I think that's like what it gained was like this, like, oh, it's, you know, that's like what people think the show is. But in reality, you see everything unfold. It does so much to like build up to moments like that are very like kind of like clarity moments. And so, you know, I just think it's brilliant. Like I can't gush more about the show. I think it's just done so well. There's only like a couple little criticisms I have. And funny enough, some of them are in this, or not in Ruthie, but they're like around Ruthie.
Sure.
There's like one storyline that I was like, felt like could be handled a little better, but like even then it's not bad in any way, shape or form. And you can probably argue for it being perfect the way it is. You know, that's what's nice about the show.
Going back to what you said about that Good Damage clip, I also feel like especially towards the end of the show when they're doing these kind of culminating ideas for these characters, that's one in particular that I feel like is so core to almost every character's journey in the show. Like every character we learn about the different traumas and in their past that have shaped who they are. And obviously her specific journey is like, how do I use that to make it have been worth it? But every character is reacting and doing what they do in these shows because of the damage that they've all accumulated over their life. And that's like, it's kind of like the big unifying thing for all the characters in the show.
Yeah. To point that out about it is kind of like to like willfully ignore like what the cartoon is trying to say, like not even trying to figure out like what does this mean thematically, just like seeing like 30 seconds and going like, I don't like how this cartoon is talking to me. I don't think this is.
Okay, exactly. So let's talk Ruthie. So you chose the great episode, season 4, which is my favorite season of BoJack. Ruthie is a great episode. Why did you choose Ruthie?
So Ruthie is my favorite episode of the show. I remember when I first saw it, it's the hardest I've ever cried. And normally I just let the next episode play, but it was like the only one that I was like, I stopped it and kind of had a moment because I was like, that is one of the most like, and something about me, I like to cry and I like to tell stories that can get that emotional response. And I've been honored because it's been more so Helluva than Hazbin, but Helluva is the show I think that gets more into this kind of BoJack territory just by nature of it being very, very flawed characters, a much more intimate story. It's about divorce and abuse and overcoming and having those things that defined you when you were younger cause problems in your later life and things like that. And that's obviously a huge aspect of BoJack is, how damaged of a character BoJack is. And, and obviously he kind of goes to levels that I don't even know if I can in good conscience take some of my characters, but like, it's one of those things where that's what's brilliant about it is that like, that's what's brilliant about the show is it's about specifically his growth out of being this kind of almost villainous person, like not a villain, but like villainous levels of actions that are like almost unforgivable to some people, or could be impossible to forgive or atone for. And I think that's what's brilliant about it because I'm like, it's so complicated and it's so like, and I think obviously later in the show they have this incredible moment where like you understand BoJack all the way up to this point where you get a reveal of something that you didn't know that he did, and it makes you question whether or not you can like him, and like all the other characters are reacting in real time. That's brilliant. So again, show is brilliant. But with Ruthie, I have a lot of connection with Princess Carolyn as a character. She's not like the this is me character, but she is like the character I heavily like. I am a workaholic. I have a really hard time with work-life balance. I am incredibly ambitious in a challenging world. The adult animation world isn't really a women's game. So it's, there's been challenge there. There's been expectancy. I'm also a woman on the internet. There's a whole fucking can of worms there. Like there's a lot of overcoming when you're in this universe and in this industry. Sorry, my cat is again. Also, fun fact: she's also a Persian cat, which is also what my kitty is. She's a Persian cat.
Oh, amazing!
I love cats. I'm a cat person too, which also helps with the character. Oh my god, sure. Pixel! Are you gonna go behind?
Wait, what's her name?
Go behind? Her name's Pixel.
Oh, Pixel. Okay,
I thought. Yes.
Yeah, cute. I heard Hazel, which is my cat growing up. I had a cat named Hazel.
Oh my goodness! Did you hear that? Yeah. She decided to climb over the stuff I have on the desk instead of going around. Anyway,
she heard us talking about her.
Yes,
I gotta get out of
here. I have 3 cats. I have Pixel, Honeybee, and Nugget. Those are my 3 cats.
Cute.
Sometimes Nugget shows up, but I have not seen him today. But yeah, no. I love Princess Carolyn as a character. I think she's just interesting. She's complex. She's obviously more in a different side of the industry than me. I think she's much more oriented around money and growth and things like that. Whereas I'm more of a creative person, so I'm more fixated. But it's a similar thing of I gotta tell my stories. I've got to do, you have this drive. So I've always loved her character and found a lot of her struggles incredibly relatable. And that episode, obviously centering around her struggles that are more in the personal side of her life and how the world kind of just that one bad day that just everything goes wrong. I've had a number of those days in my life, and it really is just this thing that is overwhelming. And so there's the scene where she's crying in the car, and I'm like, oh my, that's such a real moment. I've had those moments, and I've felt that level of pressure and heartbreak and just feeling like everything's over. But the episode has this kind of, she's still, moving forward and everything like that. But then the ultimate reveal at the end of the episode, literally, I think that was the hardest I've ever been hit by an ending in BoJack. Yeah. Because even some of the darker things that happen later, I don't think hit me as much as that one did, just because we're so invested in this horrible day. And there's this tiny little glimmer of hope in it. And then we get it just ripped away from us. And yeah, I just had to stop and digest it when I first saw it. And it's still the episode that gets me, especially if I have the show on the background, it doesn't hit me as hard. But when I am watching the show, every single time I cry. I just cannot not have that moment
totally
hit.
It's such a quintessential PC episode. She's also, I think she's my favorite character as well. But early in the show, we had this episode Say Anything that was the first PC episode where she has a similarly difficult day where everything starts to go wrong. She loses a huge client. BoJack fires her to work with her rival because he wants to date her and gets her hopes up. And everything is going wrong. She loses her big project to her rival. And then that episode is kind of about everything going wrong, her picking herself up and saying, you got to get your shit together. And then actually coming out on top at the end, even though it still has kind of this gut punch moment at the end where all of her hard work is kind of undermined. But
yeah, it's kind of for nothing.
Right. But this one, it does that same thing without any of the we don't get to see until later in the show her build herself back up. This is everything PC has built up to this point in the show comes crumbling down in one episode. And it challenges, I think what was really interesting to me about it is that every single thing that goes wrong, it challenges it challenges her past, her present, and her future, where learning that her necklace, that she has all this personal meeting to from her past and her history is not real. It's a fake story that her mom told her. And then to learn that her partner, Judah, lied to her about something really important in their business, everything she believes about her current professional situation, a lie. And then to lose her kid and break up with Ralph, everything about her perceived future, gone. Like it is, it could not be so more thoroughly devastating.
Yes. No, it's insane, like how like well crafted also the bad day, you know, like just like everything being lost at once is so it's just devastating. And then on top of that, this coping mechanism that we're revealed to as the audience, it's just such a well crafted idea. Like I can't get it, because obviously the show is full of episodes like that are these kind of amazing setups for a really impactful story. But it's just so that this one in particular to me, just like that even just like whoever, like whether it was Raphael or whoever came up with that framing device of like, this is what the gut punch of the episode's gonna be, and it's gonna be great. And it's like I love that about it, for sure.
That's what I think is like really great about this one, and it's kind of a testament to the cartoon in general, because like both of you, like I've seen the cartoon like over maybe like 5 times, and I put this on and knew exactly where it was gonna go, and it still punched me at the end. When she reveals the coping mechanism to BoJack, like just the way that they frame it, the way that the shot is composed, like it's like, even because it's like simple animation, but the show is beautiful. Like it's always been like really pretty, and it's been strategic with like blocking and like sequences and stuff like that. And that's just another one of those. Even like her earlier, like her argument with Judah, like the lighting in that scene, and like it's just, you can tell like it's just bad vibes, like off the walk-in. You know what I mean? It's a really pretty show.
The Judah scene is so heartbreaking.
It is.
It's so like, it's something that I also like about the show, because I'm a very, obviously my artistic style is the opposite of BoJack. Like that's the one thing that BoJack did not influence in any way, was the art style. But it is amazing to me, because normally I am kind of personally adverse to styles like BoJack that are stiffer and a little bit less expressive. And I don't know, I think it's just the way the story is crafted. It kind of needs to be a little, like, I feel like if it was too animated, in some ways, some of these stories wouldn't hit as hard, because it is such a like dry kind of, the dialogue's very dry. There isn't a lot of background music. There isn't, like all these things that you kind of don't think about when you're watching it. But I've gone back and watched it kind of with some of these things in mind, and I'm like, there's not a lot of like score in this show. There's not a lot of like things going on. Like it's really just kind of realistic. It's very like, this is kind of the sounds that would be in this scene. This is kind of like how dry it would feel. These are kind of how long the conversations would go, like normally. Like I think I'm very attracted to things that are written very naturally, or feel like they're real conversations that people could have. And I think the show is just comprised of that. And so I think that's something that I think makes it beautiful, is that it's so simple and so kind of real, that the style and everything, and the characters not being as expressive as I think you'd see in other cartoons is kind of what helps it in a way.
It almost feels like that's an important juxtaposition, because like the world feels like it should be so cartoony. It's all animal people, you know, like it's a very silly world. But the story and characters are obviously so grounded and realistic that it almost feels like if the animation was this bigger, sillier, if there was like squash and stretch type of stuff, if you had really silly expressions, it would almost undermine like the tone.
You know what's so funny about that though, is that like a couple years later, Toucan and Birdie would do that.
That's
not to the exact same degree, but like they, it's the same design, and it's like so silly. I famously I've said that it took me like 3 times to like get into it because it was so loud. But like once I finally like sat down, I loved it.
That's one that I left off my list. I love that show too. That show and Harley Quinn. I have Harley a similar energy. Harley Quinn it's really fun. That one came out very similar to like around the time of Hazbin. And like I had always wanted to do something because I adore the Batman Rogues Gallery. They were a huge influence on me and on Hazbin. And so seeing that show come out, I was like, this is just what I would have done if I was ever in charge of these characters. It's so great. So that show is awesome. And obviously it's newer, and I think that's why it slipped my mind. But that one and Tuca and Birdie, coming from a little bit more of a female perspective, I think also like there is a really fun splash of that. And I think that's what's nice is like Hazbin and those shows like have this more female center around it with the adult humor, which I think makes it really, really fun. But yeah, Tuca and Birdie is one that was able to balance. I think it's significantly less dark than BoJack, and less gritty and less real. But it deals with things in a very like it when it wants to get deep, it gets very deep.
Yeah, it
which
has
I think
its
is really cool.
heavy moments. But that is also one of my favorites. I really wish they had gotten another season. I know they didn't quite end it where they wanted to. Well, maybe one day, but
maybe one day. It feels like one that could have a chance.
And I'm just also grateful that it got those other 2 seasons after Netflix canceled it. Like that's a miracle in itself.
Yeah.
And season 2 is like one of my favorite seasons of television ever. Like I love Tuca and Birdie season 2. The episode Night Friends is like, I adore it. The one she's walking around at night. Oh my God, it's so
That's
good.
the one.
So good, yeah.
What a good show. Okay, so Ruthie. This season is so good. It's so crazy to point out how many. Like this season has Old Sugarman Place, which is my favorite episode. It has Stupid Piece of Shit, which is like many people's favorite episode. It's got Ruthie, which is many people's favorite episode, and it's got Time's Arrow, which is like those are 4 all-time BoJack episodes, and they're all in this one season. I just really feels like they were like really firing on all cylinders in this season.
That season really had. It feels like everything was figured out in that season. I think the only I could be wrong because there's one plot line that I personally am not like the biggest. I wouldn't even. It's not bad, but I'm not the biggest fan of. So I get mixed up on which season it happens in. Is that Peanut Butter running for governor in that season?
That is the beginning. Yes,
that's the only plot line that I'm kind of like, that happens too.
That is probably one of the most overtly cartoony plot lines in the show.
So silly.
Like the ski race in the first episode, the ski race for the governor. Yes, it is pretty funny. I mean, it is definitely
it's
feels
really
a little
funny.
Different.
Yeah, I think it's just because so much other stuff that's really good is happening that one.
Sure,
it is the break, it's the reprise, but that's also why I kind of forget. Like I'm like, that is also happening at the same time. I remember that. Yeah,
totally. Do you have any other like favorite things about this episode? Favorite scenes that you want to talk about before we
I don't know, like the whole thing, it's kind of hard to pinpoint scene. I know I really love personally, there's the moment where she sees Charlie again at the jewelers and he's like, I'm so proud of you, and she's like, your approval means nothing to me. That's such a like real moment. Like I especially like being any kind of hard-working woman where you see someone else just fail upwards and then they say anything to you. It's just like, I don't give a shit.
What a
that
funny
moment
character.
I really like. I think it's such a good, and he's also just a really funny character. Like I love that character.
And his voice by Raphael. Raphael Bob Baxberg doing the voice of
I
Charlie
didn't know
Witherspoon.
that.
Yes.
I was gonna.
I didn't know that. I thought it was the other actor.
Sure.
Blanket Adam Conover, is that his name? I thought it was him.
Adam Conover, who
he's
is
all
married.
over the show.
Yeah, and he's married to Lisa Hannawalt, who is who created Tuca and Birdie. Yeah,
that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Nope, it's Raphael. Yeah, it's Raphael Bob Waxberg doing the voice of Charlie Witherspoon.
That's
such
a funny
That's so
voice.
funny.
It's such
That's
a
so funny.
voice.
I just pulled up the wiki and I was laughing because the 2 images they have for him are marked intern and CEO. His two models.
His 2 roles.
That's pretty funny.
Just the failing upwards. Very high.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
I like that he brought the Utah Jazz and then he tries to make them agents.
I
didn't remember that.
So funny.
As the line's like, they're terrible agents, but they're getting better.
They're getting better.
Oh, how good.
That's so good.
Cool. I did want to bring this up. I mean, obviously with the musical and Broadway connections, Vanessa Gecko's played by Kristen Chenoweth. I didn't realize that till recently. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I knew the second she talked. I was like, that's Kristen. She's got a very, very iconic voice.
Tariq and I were also laughing because obviously you cast Stephanie Beatriz in Hazbin, who's great, but then her whole story, she's got a whole subplot in season 5 where her character wants to be singing on Broadway. She wants to do musicals. Just thought that was a really fun connection there.
Yeah, it's funny because I was familiar with Stephanie before, but for some reason I didn't make that connect until much later. That I was like, that's her, again, that's one of my personal. I really like season 5, so that one is really like a big season to me. And the other funny thing about that episode that I think is really, really I just couldn't stop joking about was that her whole thing is that she was inspired by a musical about corn. And that's the whole thing. There is, in fact, a Broadway musical about corn. It's closed now, but I saw it a number of times. It was a great show. It was good. But it was, in fact, about corn. Yeah. Oh, it was. It was. The show was called Shucked. It was an adult comedy. It was adorable. I actually am in love with the show. It felt like a 90s movie that had never existed because it's about a small town that like their biggest export is corn, but like the characters are so simple and silly. And like one of the big songs and the big jokes is that the corn's dying. So one of the girls from the town is like, I'm going to go find someone who can help save our corn. And she leaves and she goes to Tampa, Florida. And she thinks that means that she's like a woman of the world. There's a whole song where she's like, I'm a woman of the world. Cause she went to Tampa, Florida. It's the funny, like, it's so cute. It's adult, but it is like in that like old 90s movie kind of adult, like almost Beetlejuice, where it's like seen it. It's adult. It's a delight. The good news is that it's getting a movie adaptation. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's gonna be so hopefully they keep the charm of the show because the show was so fucking charming. And like Alex Newell was in it playing the main booze maker of the town, and like it's like she's incredible. So like there's the powerhouse song from her. It's great. It was a great show. But the funny thing about it to me was I was like, oh my God, there really is a fucking Broadway show about corn. BoJack predicted. So BoJack predicted. Shucks.
Yes. And you know what? They have, and it's so funny because it feels like they put out these ideas that feel so silly and then they happen and are huge hits. And like the other one that's so funny in BoJack, is the one where it's a PB live-in scene where they're talking to where PB and Todd are talking to their lawyer, and he's mad at them because they paid for the rights to the game Tag to a child, and they hold up a poster for a movie called Tag, and then they made the Tag.
Yeah, there was a movie called Tag.
And even more insane, the lawyer is voiced by Jake Johnson, who is in Tag, who is the star of Tag.
He is. He's one of the stars. I've seen Tag like twice. That movie is sick. I love that shit. That shit is great.
I need to see it. It kind of looked really funny. Like I was like, this kind of looks great. I never ended up seeing it, but
it's really funny and surprisingly sincere. It's like super sincere.
That's awesome. I love when things are surprisingly sincere.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on. Like we've been waiting to talk about BoJack for so long, and so like to be able to talk to you about it, and you're obviously so passionate about the show, as passionate as we are about BoJack. It's perfect.
I love it. No, I don't get to talk about it that much because especially in at least my circle of friends, I'm like the only major person who likes it. Like I turned it on to my co-writer Adam Nealon, and so now I can talk about it with him because he took a lot away from it that was different from me, and so we've had like some really deep conversations about it because like he likes certain characters more than me. He doesn't like, so like he hates certain characters that I like. You know what I mean? Like it's always interesting, but there aren't that many people who like know the show as intimately and like want to talk about it. So it's like, it was great to get to talk about it. I love the show. Much love to everyone who made it possible. And much love to the brilliant writers on that show. And thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah. I was laughing at you saying that, you would kind of think twice about taking some of the Helluva characters to places that they would even take BoJack characters. Is like the only place more depraved than hell is Hollywood.
Yeah.
Literally, because like for me it's like it's less like that I wouldn't be willing, because there are some, I mean, obviously, especially in Hazbin, people have seen like some of the villains go pretty hard, but they're villains, right? But like a character like Blitz, there's certain like lines I'm like, if I took Blitz as far down this road as BoJack, I don't think he could come back. I don't think his like ability would survive, especially since like part of Helluva's journey is wounded people that find solace in each other. So it's a little bit more at the heart of it's a romance. I feel like it's pretty obvious by now to people who watch the show that the main heart of the show is Blitz and Stolas's relationship, and every other character and their relationship to Blitz is like what the show's about. Like that's why it's funny too, because I've seen the comment where people are like, why don't they go on missions? The show's called Helluva Boss, and I'm like, well, it's about the Helluva Boss. It's not called.
It's about the boss.
It's not called IMP. The show's called Helluva Boss, not IMP.
Boss.
So it's about him. It's about his relationships, his journey to make the business, all those things. So to me, I'm like, that's like the heart of it, is like him finding these relationships with other people. Whereas BoJack is a show about one flawed person and almost like how his trauma and his decisions cause the hurt around him, you know, and like how far that can go. But it's also got this hopeful ending of like, but you can always do better, which obviously the theme of redemption matters a lot to me. That's what Hazbin's about. And I think that was another aspect of the show that I loved, because as somebody who, you know, you feel like when you've made a mistake that you can never make up for it and everything like that. And what I love about BoJack is it's a character who makes the worst like mistakes that are debatably unforgivable. But it's also showing that with enough like care and love and support, even those people can at least start a journey to try to make up for it or better themselves or something. You know what I mean? Like I like that the end of the show is that no matter how broken and messed up a person is, you don't owe them forgiveness, but we should at least hope that they will try to do better, you know?
Exactly.
And
I feel like that's something that people don't give not enough. Obviously a lot of fans of the show pick up on that, but it does feel like a lot will watch it and just be like, well, that was a show about a bad guy. But the whole idea is that even if true redemption and being forgiven, and like even if there's nothing in it for him, he can, like, in the long run, it's, you know, in terms of like getting back to where he was before, there's always it's always good to just try and be better and better yourself. It's never too late, even if you're so far gone, to just like try. And so that's, I think the ending of the show, as sad as it is, like that it's really optimistic, even though I'm like sobbing at Mr. Blue every time that scene plays. I think it's like an interestingly optimistic show.
And I think they knock you down purposefully to show you that it's out, because the view from halfway down right before, it like knocks you to like the lowest point. It was like, oh, well, he's just fucking dead. It's over. Like, you know what I mean?
And you're like, oh my God, that's where it ends? Like, and then it's not.
Right. It lifts you back up and like tells you like, look, he's not dead, but you know, he's still gonna try to make things happen. Like, and that's just what life is at a certain point.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is great. I love that.
Amazing. Well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on with us. This was great. We would love to, I mean, honestly, we're doing this new format, and we're going to be having a lot of guests on, but if at any point in the future you want to come back and talk more BoJack or talk other shows, we just
absolutely
we love geeking out about cartoons. So this was so great.
I love it. No, this is great. I love the focus on adult animation specifically too, because I feel like, you know, I don't know, it's taken for granted and not a lot of people focus on kind of like how unique it can be and how fun. So like I love it. I'm very honored to come on and talk about BoJack.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Obviously everyone should watch Hazbin on Amazon Prime, Helluva on YouTube. Anything else you want to plug? This won't come out for a couple months, but you know, anything you want to point people to? Honestly,
no, that's probably it. I mean, in a couple months, like maybe we'll have more Helluva to look forward to in the near-ish future. We're hoping to get the second half of season 2 out this year by at least by the end of the year, have every the last I think 5 episodes are out. So hopefully, but either way, I'm so excited. Obviously we're working hard on season 2 of Hazbin, and I can't wait for people to see that. And yeah, both shows are currently available in different places. Hazbin on Prime and Helluva on YouTube. And yeah, thank you guys so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Now I got to do my ending spiel. Whenever we have guests, I was like, hey, now here's my ending spiel. How do I do this? I say, and with that, I want to thank Carrie Feek for our artwork. I want to thank Jake Neutron for our theme song. I want to thank Michael Yunez for producing and editing the podcast. I want to thank Tariq for co-hosting this show with me whenever we feel like making it. I want to thank you, Viv, for coming on and joining us. We need to thank our patrons, the cursed ones, and our audience in general for making it possible for us to make this show. We love you and we appreciate you, but also, thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah, bye.